It's official. The mad scientist, if you want to call him that, is staying in Cincinnati. Lou Anarumo is not going anywhere, as Jonathan Gannon, the former Eagles defensive coordinator, is the Cardinals' newest head coach, which means Anarumo is going to be back for his 5th season in Cincinnati. Welcome into another edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast, off-season style. Muhammad Ahmad here with you alongside Andrew Gillis and Mike Neislick per usual. And that is the big headline story of the day. Zach Taylor keeps his coordinators together, Brian Callahan and Lou Anarumo, for the 5th straight year. And if you want to talk about Dan Pitcher, he keeps that trio together for the 4th straight year, because Pitcher's first year was Joe Burrow's rookie year in 2020. And just jumping into it, guys, I mean, if you look at the odds makers, at least I saw BetMGM, they moved the Bengals from the 4th, 5th most favored team to win the Super Bowl to number 2, right behind the Chiefs, plus 850, which shows you this is a pretty big deal. I think the Bengals didn't just hit a home run. I think they're going to have the best coaching continuity in the NFL next year. I mean, how big of a deal is this for the Bengals? I mean, that's not
so
really
I think they're two different
really
issues.
known.
So those are two different things. I think what happened was, Anarumo, that might have helped, but the betting odds have been out for one day.
Money shifts the line. That's what it is. That's what he's trying.
Yeah, I don't know if it's. I mean, if it was something like a player acquisition, obviously that'll change it. But people probably looked at it. I mean, we talked about it and we were like, yeah, you can kind of look anywhere from 2 to 5 and really be okay with it. So I think a lot of people looked at the Bengals and went, okay, they have good. What are they sitting, 3rd, 4th, third or whatever they were. Yeah, I think a lot of people looked at it and went, okay, that feels like good value to me. So I think that's what would cause the Bengals to move up. I don't think it was Anarumo, but specifically to Anarumo, it's a big deal. You don't have to kind of worry about you don't have to worry about a new coordinator coming in. You kind of look at the changes that could happen defensively this year. You need to work in a second-year safety who is taking over for a really talented player in Jesse Bates. You still got a second-year corner. Who knows what Chidobe Awuzie is going to look like when he comes back, and who knows who's going to be that other corner with Cam Taylor-Britt. The secondary is going to have some questions, and you need a guy with a secondary background to help that out. You might lose Jermaine Pratt. You want to have some continuity in the coaching staff if you're not going to have it on the roster. And obviously, he did a really good job defending Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. You can kind of go down the list of the teams that have struggled offensively against the Bengals. And looking at the schedule next year, you're going to play Derrick Henry again and in Tennessee. You're going to play the Bills again in Cincinnati. You're going to play the Chiefs in Arrowhead. The Ravens, you're going to play them twice, obviously. The Colts are going to have a high draft pick. The Texans are going to have a high draft pick and have some quarterback help. You're going to play some talented quarterbacks again. And adding a guy who's done pretty well at defending elite quarterbacks is a big deal.
Are you saying one of the reasons that getting him back is important is because they're going to play the Texans?
Well, you're going to play C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young. Sure.
That's crazy talk. The Texans are going to be terrible.
The Colts are going to be. I think. We're going to get into this way into the summer, but the Colts, I kind of like them if you can get a quarterback, because their quarterback play over the last few years has been absolutely horrible. But their defense is pretty good. Their offensive line is pretty good. So yeah, and if you saw the press conference today in Indianapolis with Irsay, they kind of tipped their hand as to what they're going to do. He talked about going after a young quarterback. So they wanted an offensive-minded guy, but you can credit Joe, part of Joe Burrow's success for what this staff has done with him. But Philadelphia also has Jalen Hurts, and his progression might be more impressive than Joe Burrow's. I think you could make that argument pretty cleanly. Joe Burrow was the number 1 overall pick. Jalen Hurts was the 2nd overall pick. People really kind of doubted him coming into this year. And he played the best game of his life just a few days ago. So I think that you can kind of look at quarterback development. And I think a lot of teams are doing that, because if you can get an offensive guy in there with a younger head coach, like a younger quarterback, young head coach. Even if the head coach is going to miss, if you develop the quarterback, you're going to be fine for 12 to 15 years. So I feel like that's kind of the way that a lot of teams are looking at it. Like, listen, the head coach isn't going to work out. That's fine because our defense is a mess, whatever. But if we get the quarterback right, we're going to be okay. So I think that is kind of their theory. And, I mean, you look around the league, there's a lot of other success stories in terms of quarterback development, and Hurts might be one of them that's better than Burrows.
I agree with that, and I guess I see what you're saying. They wanted someone who they know can develop any quarterback, whereas, I mean, Joe Burrow was just a whole shot, Heisman winner, national title winner, and then once he got back from his injury, I mean, the rest was history. So it's not that, like, Callahan didn't do anything. I mean, clearly he had a job to do, but the development was just so different because they already knew what they were getting. But, I mean, no, the Jalen Hurts development story is absolutely no debate the best in the league. And I didn't say that to, like, say, oh, Steichen's not good, but I just wonder, like, how much different was he from Callahan? Like, did Callahan maybe get beat out? Like, was there something maybe they didn't see in him? But when you put it like that, I mean, I think if they already had a quarterback who was good, it'd be one thing. I think Callahan would have been better for the job. So I think if Callahan gets another head coaching job, which I think it's only a matter of time for him, and even Lou Anarumo, who I'll get back to, but I think it'd fit Callahan better with a system where they know who the guy is and what the guy's doing, whereas with the Colts, it's like, they don't know. I mean, obviously they know they're going to draft someone. They just don't know what it's going to look like. So that's a good point there. But to go back to the point about continuity, you can't understate how important that is because you think about it. Zach Taylor has his coordinators back for the 5th straight year with Dan Pitcher, who got multiple, job offers like the Buccaneers offensive coordinator job. You include him, that's 4 straight years with your 3 main guys. And I mean, Darren Simmons has been there forever, but you also have Darren Simmons, who's his assistant head coach. And like, just to look at the list here of other teams that compared to the Bengals continuity, I mean, the Chiefs are at the forefront because Eric Reed, or did I just say Eric Reed? Oh my gosh. Andy Reid, his brother plays for Andy Reid. Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, and Steve Spagnuolo have been together collectively for 4 years. Their first year was when they won their first championship. Their special teams coach, who's kind of like their Darren Simmons, Dave Taub, he's been with him in that stretch too. Then you look at Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier together for 6 seasons since McDermott's been in Buffalo basically. Mike McDonald and John Harbaugh had 2 stints together, but they've been together for 8 years. Now he's a defensive coordinator. You had Greg Roman, who was there for 4 years till he stepped down. And all those teams have done fairly well. Like, they've made the playoffs and they've been championship contenders. Of course, the Chiefs just happened to win the big game. So it is such a big deal. And you can't say it's only continuity. It's everything that goes with it. But when you look at the talent the Chiefs have, the talent the Bengals have, I mean, the continuity is so important. Like you talked about, you're going against Patrick Mahomes. You need Lou Anarumo because he's beaten him 3 times and almost beat him a 4th time. Came this close to beating him a 4th time. You have Josh Allen, who he's already beaten once in the playoffs on the road in January. And don't forget, you have to deal with Nick Chubb twice a year. He's still a problem. They're going to deal with Derrick Henry again next year, and they dealt with him last year. He had one of his worst games of the year against the Bengals. And, I mean, you look at what they did to Stephon Diggs and other elite receivers. Like, they didn't really let Stephon Diggs do much. I don't think he was trending in the right direction anyway in the playoffs. But, I mean, that was a maestro performance with all of those names that Anarumo put together. I mean, when you guys think about the continuity that I just mentioned with the Bengals, I mean, how imperative is it when you think about other teams to have that continuity? Like, how much is that going to help them go against the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens, who are used to having that continuity I mentioned?
I think it helps around the edges, but I mean, I think you downplay the fact that when you have a franchise quarterback that's one of the top 3 players in the league, I mean, you can roll whoever out there, it ain't gonna matter. Like, I mean, I don't think it will significantly alter what the Bengals do either way. I think it helps in terms of, like I said, on defense, trying to get the best and maximize that talent. But I mean, ultimately to the results, I think the results aren't going to be that much different. Whoever they had being the coordinators, that's not nothing against Callahan or Lou, but I mean, you have a team that has one of the best players in the league. You're not going to alter that, I don't think, with a different coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this throughout the year. I think it was December, January, right as these interviews kind of started to come in. We mentioned that losing Lou was probably a bigger deal than losing Callahan. There were options for elevations if both of those guys were to leave. It wouldn't have been, the sky is falling. Oh no, this is terrible. We're losing this great play caller, this great this great that. Like, you could have managed it. They felt strongly, and kind of the guys that, they had coming up, like, for example, if Callahan leaves, pitchers, your offensive coordinator had felt, pretty slam dunk that it was just going to be an in-house elevation. But, keeping those guys, I think, like I mentioned with keeping Anarumo, I think it's just as important, the continuity and everything, but it's also important to have a coach that the players respect. The defensive guys obviously really, really like Lou. They've talked about him in a lot of positive lights in just kind of the things that he does. And, you hear the word trust thrown around a lot. Mike Hilton uses that a lot where, he trusts me. And that's really big because Mike Hilton, when he's blitzing off the edges and things like that, I mean, you need to have a coach that trusts you to do that and trusts that you're going to make the right decision, because otherwise, if you're going to make a free call decision where you're doing something on your own, you got to understand that coach might be pissed at you. And Lou kind of has that expectation with his players. He holds his players to high standards, but, he really does like them. So I think that the Lou stuff, I mentioned when you lose some guys on defense, that's going to matter. But offensively, like this kind of feels like a machine where you can just plug and play at this point. As long as you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, it's going to take a lot to derail the train. And the offensive line imploding is one of them, but it took 3 injuries for the offensive line to kind of implode and show their ass in the playoff game. So
show their ass.
Yeah. And they played really well against Buffalo. That unit played really, really well against Buffalo. They ran the ball remarkably effectively. Even then, even when you lose 3 starting linemen, you can kind of manage. This offense is just that good.
So 2 things I want to ask, and I want to start with you, Mike. So I actually agree. I mean, if you take out Callahan, sub, and pitcher, they're fine. They're more than fine, I'd say. And I'm with you, Andrew. But you don't think if they were to lose Lou Anarumo, that wouldn't be a big deal? I don't think their defense would be derailed, but you don't think that would have a significant impact if he took that coaching job?
On their win total? On their win total,
again?
no. On their win total, no.
Maybe not their win total, but you don't think they would have had some growing pains?
But ultimately, what matters?
Well, the trust. I'm not saying another coach won't trust, like Mike Hilton or whoever's back, but there's just a certain kind of he understands what their strengths are.
I mean, they're not going to pull somebody off the street and just be like, "Here's a clipboard, go coach the defense." I mean,
that's not what I'm saying, but it's not going to be you have to understand. It took him 4 years to build up that defense, and it's built where it is with or without him. But he knows how to maintain it to the degree he did, where he knows how to do to Mahomes what other defensive coordinators couldn't do. He knows how to do to Josh Allen that not many other defensive coordinators know how to do.
Mahomes lost other games, and they eliminated the Bengals.
Not many other games, though. He's that good. Not that many other
games. They eliminated the Bengals. So, I mean, it's not like...
barely did it after 3 losses to them, including the AFC Championship.
My point is ultimately the impact it would have on the team next year would not be measured in I just don't see how what are they going to lose? They're going to lose 3 more games or something. That would be like a Titanic impact. I just don't think a coordinator with a talented team and one of the best quarterbacks in the league would equal that. So no, I don't think that.
Let's reverse it. What if the Chiefs lost Steve Spagnuolo? You think that defense, it's good, and they'd be really good.
They would be the Super Bowl favorites next year, no matter what.
They will be, but you don't think their defense might have some growing pains if they were to for whatever reason lose Spagnuolo? What if another coordinator has a different philosophy that maybe isn't what those guys are used to?
Well, they wouldn't just bring in somebody that would do something. They would bring in somebody in that tree if they wanted to maintain the continuity. That's how the NFL works. You wouldn't go the Bengals wouldn't look for somebody to replace Lou that runs a 3-4. That they'd have to reshake the whole defense. That's just not how those things work.
Maybe not in that sense. No, I mean, right, because he does more of a 5-2.
When you're at a certain level of quarterback, it doesn't matter as much who the coordinators are. I mean, it's a very small handful of teams, but you're not going to tell me that Patrick Mahomes wouldn't win 13 games next year with a different defensive coordinator.
We're not talking about Patrick Mahomes, though. He's going to be fine. I mean, even without
You
Eric
just asked,
Bieniemy,
you said if they lost Steve Spagnuolo.
we're talking about the defense. How would the defense look? I'm not talking about winning or losing games, because I agree their win-loss total probably won't be much different, just like if the Bengals lost Lou Anarumo. Patrick Mahomes has nothing to do with this. I'm talking about the defense. The defense would be fine. They wouldn't lose or be bad, but would they be like flashy the way they were with the schemes that Spagnuolo has been drawing up the last 4 or 5 years?
But you're not trying to win style points. You're trying to win the game. So if you're at the point where you're saying their win-loss total wouldn't be different, what does it matter?
Well, it can. It can. I mean, I'm saying I don't think it'll be significantly impacted, but I'm saying you have that possibility that if there's some like maybe issues with one side, whether it's rushing defense, passing defense, secondary, linebackers, whatever, maybe because this guy does things a little bit differently, not off the rails different, but a little bit differently from whatever Spagnuolo did. I don't know. I'm not a coach. He is, obviously. Same with Anarumo, since we're bringing it back to the Bengals. I'm not saying you're going to sink and tank and all that. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I'm just saying the point is there's a reason why continuity is good. Like, you're saying it's not that big of a deal. I think it is. I'm not saying you're going to lose a lot of games without Lou Anarumo or, Brian Callahan or Dan Pitcher, but it helps. Like, comfort helps. They're comfortable with the system. They're used to the system. Like, they already know what to expect from Lou. They know what to expect from this player, that player. Like, Mike Hilton's going to be like, all right, Lou,
I understand why I'm not saying continuity is bad.
You're saying it doesn't really matter, though.
When you have one of the best offenses in the league, no, it does not matter as much.
Okay, then. I mean, I didn't say that the Bengals offense won't do anything, but I still think, for what it's worth, as amazing as Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are, like, it's complimentary football for a reason. We can be cliche all we want, but it's the truth. It's the truth. But, I mean, again, like, I think we can agree to disagree, but there's a reason why it's so rare to have that kind of continuity. Like, I only listed 3 other teams, really 2 if we don't want to include the Chiefs, only 2 other teams not named the Chiefs and Bengals who have that kind of continuity. And even then, it doesn't match up to the Bengals and Chiefs. Like, with the Bills, it's just Leslie Frazier. The Ravens, it's just Mike McDonald. Greg Roman is gone. He stepped down. So, I don't know. Like, we'll actually talk about later in the show about how the Ravens have a new offensive coordinator, and I'll get to that in a second. But, Andrew, am I crazy, or am I actually onto something here?
Well, I mean, it matters. Like, you want to have the same staff, and you want to have guys that have done well in a position stay in that position. I mean, I think the only thing, that really would have mattered, like if James Betcher and Dan Pitcher take over, I mean, Pitcher wouldn't have called plays, but like if James Betcher comes in and he's an unmitigated disaster, like if he's just genuinely a bad defensive coordinator, then yeah, that would matter, obviously. Like if you're talking about 2 ends of the spectrum, but as long as you don't think that, and I don't think he would have been, I'm not sure. I think kind of what Mike said, like you win around the edges. Now, in a playoff game, that can matter where you need 1, 2, 3 plays. But like on the whole, like I'm not sure.
Saying, yeah.
On the whole, I'm not sure it's making a ton of difference. Obviously, losing Lou would have been, it wouldn't have been good. Certainly Mike's not saying that. But you lose Lou, and if you replace him with an in-house guy who the system, like, there's no reason to change the scheme. There's no reason to change the system. The only reason you really see that is if, hey, this defense was 28th in points and 27th in run and 31st in pass, like something's not working. Like if that's when you change it up. That's when you throw the curveballs and say, okay, we're changing how we do things and why we do things. But the Bengals don't need to do that because their defense was pretty good last year. So I think that, that's not where you're at. So as long as I don't know. I think that Mike's right when you say coordinators are less impactful when you have specifically coordinators on either side of the ball, when you have a team that is as good offensively as the Bengals are. I mean, they still matter around the edges, but I just don't think that like losing Anarumo takes them from, like, if you thought the Bengals were going to go 12-5, that doesn't take them to like 9-8 or 10-7, 10 and what would that be? 10-7. Like, I'm not sure you see a noticeable difference, even if there is one. I just think that, this team the Bengals have kind of talked before about how good they feel about developing coaches and, quarterback coaches and position coaches and guys kind of rising through the ranks, analysts, things like that. And they've talked about, hey, we want to make sure that these guys are kind of growing with us. And if they get another job elsewhere, great. But if they get promoted in-house, that's kind of what we want them for. So the Bengals feel confident that, if they would have lost Anarumo, hey, it's kind of like you lose Chidobe Awuzie, like next man up. And James Betcher probably takes that job. So it would have mattered, but I don't think it makes this like massive Grand Canyon-sized gap where it's like, ooh, they might not be great. They might not be great defensively this year.
Grand Canyon. I like your analogies there. I'm a big national parks guy, so that was a good one. I used to live out in the Mountain West. I hear you on that. I don't mean to sound dramatic or exaggerated. I just really believe, and I've said this many, many times, if we're just talking about Lou Anarumo, now that D'Amico Ryans has a head coaching job, now that Jonathan Gannon has a head coaching job, I believe at this point in time, pending who takes those other jobs for the 49ers and Eagles, I think he is the best defensive coordinator in the NFL entering 2023. So, yeah, James Betcher, he's been a defensive coordinator. He's the only other coach on the Bengals staff who's been a coordinator before. He gets the system. He understands what Anarumo does, but Anarumo is he's just got a certain, I don't know, whether it's his Staten Island demeanor, his personality, his depth of knowledge. There's just something there that I feel like he has that's hard to find in other coaches. Doesn't take away from them. Doesn't take away from Betcher, who I think has done a great job with Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, and is even a big reason why their red zone defense was so good. Like, he's kind of the mastermind behind that. So he would have done a great job too, but it's just, again, there's something about Lou, man, that clearly the Cardinals saw in him that made him consider him. But when we come back, we're going to talk about shaping the AFC North from a coaching standpoint. The Ravens have a new OC. What does that mean for their quarterback, and what does their quarterback situation mean for Joe Burrow? We'll talk all about that and much, much more right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Hey there, it's Muhammad Ahmad from the Strictly Stripes podcast. You might be wondering, what exactly is Cincinnati Football Insider? Well, it's a community of fans who want the inside scoop on the Bengals and a direct connection to the Strictly Stripes podcast and the reporters who cover the team, and that would be me, Andrew Gillis, and Mike Neislick. It works like this. Andrew, Mike, and I will text your phone a few times a day with breaking news, analysis, and our insights on the Bengals. It's the inside scoop on what we're hearing, and we'll give you the inside word before it even hits social media. Being an insider is the best way to participate with the podcast and get in on special events and Zoom calls with me, Mike, and Andrew. And the best part is you can text us directly. It's a great way to cut through the clutter of Facebook, Twitter, other social media, and avoid the trolls for just $4.99 a month. Still not sure? Well, just try it for 2 weeks, and if you don't like it, you can text the word STOP at any time, but you won't want to cancel once you join the community of hardcore Bengals fans. Here's the best way to get on board. Go to cleveland.com/Bengals, click on the blue banner at the top of the page, or if it's easier, text 513-940-4193. It's a great time to try the 2 weeks free, as we'll be reporting live from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Plus, we'll be covering free agency on the way to the NFL Draft in April. Give us a try for 2 weeks and see what you think. Just text this number again. It's 513-940-4193 and become an insider today. And welcome back into the Strictly Stripes podcast. So elsewhere around the NFL in the coaching carousel, the Ravens have hired Todd Monken to be their new offensive coordinator after Greg Roman stepped down at the end of the year. He has been an offensive coordinator in the NFL before. He was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a couple years. He spent one season with the Cleveland Browns in 2019 in Freddie Kitchens' last year. It wasn't very eventful. They went 6-10, but then he goes to Georgia, and he wins 2 back-to-back national titles with the Bulldogs. So I guess it didn't work in Cleveland, but it worked in Athens, and the Ravens think it'll work in Baltimore. The reason why I bring this up, though, is because we all know about Lamar Jackson's situation. He's not under contract. It seems like the Ravens are going to franchise tag him. But if it's a non-exclusive tag, unless the Ravens can match what another team were to offer Lamar, then that's that. So do you see this affecting whether Lamar stays or goes in Baltimore? Does it really just have nothing to do with it? Or, I mean, let's imagine Lamar does stay, for example. Like, how do you see that changing the Ravens' offense, and how do the Bengals kind of have to deal with that next year? Like, at least what do you guys think of Monken in that sense?
Well, I mean, Monken, he's kind of got a passing background, which I think, the Ravens, they tried to lean into the run game over the last few years, they're good, but they were not, the level that they want to be. They talked about Lamar Jackson being involved in those discussions, so I think this is something to monitor in the AFC North, because if Lamar doesn't sign a long-term deal, if he's going to play this year under the franchise tag, then you're not really worried about it. If you're the Bengals, and I wouldn't even say they're worried about it. I just think you keep tabs on it because, Lamar is trying to get paid, and you look at some of the money thrown around the league. Deshaun Watson, $230 million guaranteed. Rodgers is making $50 million a year. Mahomes is like a $500 million deal. Josh Allen's over $250 million total. Like you can kind of look at some of the numbers, and I mean, if Lamar gets the bag, I think that matters for Burrow a little bit, because there's no way that Burrow should go to the table and say, I'm taking less than Lamar. I don't think that. I think Lamar wants to be kind of paid in the same way as Deshaun, but I think you could make a really good case that Burrow is getting more than Deshaun is going to get, or however you want to structure it with the guarantees or the total value or whatever. So, any contract that you talk about in terms of when it's going to be signed for the next year is going to be compared to Burrow. So, I think it'll matter for a little bit. And, if for some reason, if either Lamar doesn't sign a deal and Burrow doesn't sign a deal, and they're once again doing this next year, and Lamar has a great year, or Lamar signs a deal tomorrow, and then you can kind of say, okay, here's what Lamar got. Here's probably what you can do with Burrow.
So you think Burrow might not get a deal this offseason? You think that's a possibility?
I think he will. I think he will.
Okay, I was going to say.
Tried to preface it like in some crazy, bizarro world where he doesn't. Where they're like, yeah, we're just gonna kick the can down the road, and that's future Duke Tobin's problem. I don't think that they're gonna do that, nor do I think they should do that. But I just wanted to state all possibilities. I think that is extremely unlikely. So I guess the more likely example would be Lamar signs a deal in the next 2 weeks or so, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, that all adds up.
I don't remember the question.
Well, I was saying, we're talking about Todd Monken being in Baltimore. Like, do you see that changing the Ravens' offense at all? Like, I know Andrew talked about them being a passing offense, but assuming Lamar is still there next year with a new deal or the franchise tag, like, how do you see that changing up the Ravens' offense next year? What does that mean for the Bengals' game plan against Todd Monken instead of Greg Roman this time around?
We're talking about the Bengals' game plan for the Ravens game on February 14th. I'm really excited about this. I have no idea. I don't think it'll shift all that much because your personnel is what your personnel is. They're not going to be able to remake it in one off season. And they've got a lot of running backs. They got a fullback. They got a lot of tight ends. They're not going to be able to just sort of flip a switch. They got no wide receivers. It'll be a slower process, and I think it's just you don't snap your fingers and change your offense. But as far as the Bengals' game plan for the Ravens, we don't know the days of those games, right? Because we don't know the schedule yet.
We do not, no.
Yeah, 3 months.
We don't know. Okay, so I'm not really sure.
3-4 months.
I'll think about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. But no, I want to jump more into kind of what Andrew talked about with Lamar and, the money on the table, what that would mean for Joe Burrow. I like what you said, Andrew. If Lamar does get that deal in the offseason, if they come to it and they don't tag him, then yeah, I'm just speculating here, but I'd imagine Joe would probably say, well, Lamar is making this. He's making this. Deshaun is making this. Let's be fair. I don't really care about the money, but I care about my worth. And so I'd imagine he'd want something similar to what they make. Because like you said, it seems like Lamar wants to get that, sort of along the lines of what Deshaun has, the $230 million, which, God, I still cannot believe that sometimes. I have to read that twice when I see that. But, yeah, I definitely think it'll shift it a certain way where I think Burrow will want to get paid. But, again, you also have to counter that with he wants to be with Jamar. He wants to be with T. They want to be with him and vice versa. So It'll be interesting to see how much it moves the needle, but I definitely think it does. But if Lamar can't come to anything with the Ravens and then Burrow gets a deal, then kind of flips the table a little bit. But like you said, I mean, Burrow's guaranteed to get something. Lamar's in kind of an interesting situation. And by the way, I almost forgot he didn't have an agent. His mom represents him, right? Or like he kind of represents himself or something like that.
And do you mean in terms of like contract negotiations?
Contract negotiations, yeah.
I believe he has an agent.
Are you sure? I thought I saw somewhere that he didn't. Or am I thinking of somebody else? Either way,
Lamar, I mean, he doesn't have an agent. Like, he has to negotiate directly with the Ravens.
And, like, basically his mother is, like, his advisor because he doesn't have an agent. Sort
right.
of.
Well, I don't know if it's his mom,
That's
but
interesting.
I know Lamar has to deal with, like, Eric DaCosta and everybody in the front office, like, individually, which kind of slows things down, too.
I mean, I did not know this until recently, but, like, why would he do that? That's actually very interesting. Like, does anybody do that besides him? You know him better than me. Does anyone do that? At least in the NFL?
I have no idea.
He's an interesting guy, to say the least.
Yeah, I have no idea who would do that. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anybody, at least that I know of.
I mean, hey, mothers know best, but I mean, agents have law degrees for a reason. So I don't know, but either way, he's an interesting fella on and off the field. But it'd be something to monitor and to watch and to see how that kind of tips the needle. But stay tuned with us because this week we're going to get back into our positional reviews. Talked about quarterbacks, well, basically just quarterback because it's Joe Burrow. Talked about the running backs, and now we're going to get into the rest of the offense, including the wide receivers and the O-line. And the defense will get its turn here soon. But once again, for myself, Andrew Gillis, and Mike Nizick, I'm Muhammad Ahmad. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on Wednesday.